Well, this is where it all happened here on Tuesday evening at about 6:50 as the runners approach the final fence of the Growise Champion Novice Chase. A remarkable piece of sporting drama played out with Paul Townend suddenly taking his Mount Alboom photo in a rapid rightward direction through the wing of this final fence, taking Finian's Oscar out of the race as well and gifting it to Gordon Elliott, who saddled the first three home in the race and potentially shifting the Trainers' Championship massively in Gordon's direction. Here then on the track with the Irish Racing Post editor Richard Forrestal. And Richard, just explain what's happened this morning and what more we've learnt today on Wednesday morning.
Well, the first thing we learned this morning, I suppose, was that Paul Townend released a statement to the effect that he thought he heard a call, a shout of some sort, and he concluded from that he was to bypass the fence, and he has apologised to connections and to punters for his misunderstanding. And then no sooner had he released that via the Racing Post that the IHRB then basically released a statement to the similar effect, which they didn't do last night, which, look, we were all of the opinion that was a fairly disappointing development. They didn't relay any information from the steward's room last night. They dropped the ball in terms of dealing with the issue and conveying what happened in there. They just told us last night that he'd been suspended for 21 days for dangerous riding and forfeited his riding fee, and that was that. So at least this morning, belatedly, they've come out and they've told us what was said in the inquiry, which was basically what Paul said already in his statement, that he thought he heard a call and that the fence was to be bypassed, and by the time he realised he was wrong, it was too late. And as you outlined earlier on, we had this dramatic moment whereby he carried out Finian's Oscar and he ended up getting a slap off the ground himself when Alboom photo went through the rail.
Richie, you've race ridden, you've ridden sort of 75 odd winners as a jockey, so you can maybe put yourself into the situation of someone in those circumstances certainly more than I could and more than most people could. On this run then, from the second last fence at Punchestown down to the final fence, around halfway on this stretch of ground in between the two fences, Paul thinks he hears something. Now, in those circumstances, what would be going through his head, and what could Paul have heard? Because clearly, almost certainly wasn't someone shouting, no, bypass the fence. So what might it have been as we sort of walked down towards the fence?
Nobody knows, right? The thing about in a finish like that, there's an element of it all being in a blur. You're very much in the moment. Your head is down. You're driving. Something obviously caught his ear, and I think the most important point about it all is if you watch the replay, just before he sits up to do what he did, just before he does that, there is a fleeting moment whereby Davy Russell is on the inside of Finian's Oscar, and Davy's on the Storyteller, as we know, and there's a fleeting moment where those horses' noses veer to the right. So possibly what has happened is Paul has thought he has heard something, and at the same time or straight after it, the horses inside him have just nosed to the right a fraction. And all of a sudden, in a split second, he has concluded that the fence must be bypassed. Now, it was a gross misunderstanding, whatever it was. This is, as we're looking at the fence here, this is what he had to see. There was no bollards around the fence. There was no arrows directing him away from the fence. So, but you must understand, I suppose, in a moment of doubt, he made a decision that proved catastrophic, really, but he only had a split second. I was talking to someone about it this morning. Like, it's if you picture yourself going down a motorway or at a roundabout or whatever, and you're not familiar with where you're going, and in a moment you have to make a decision, and you decide to get off. You can get back on, you can turn around. He doesn't have that luxury. They're going at 30 odd miles an hour. He made a decision, and it proved to be the wrong one, and there was fairly serious consequences, as we know. I mean, that adds to it all the fact that it's gone from Willie Mullins looking like he was going to win the race to Gordon Elliott all of a sudden having the first three. It could prove decisive in the title race.
And to what extent, Richie, should we be angry or disappointed that there was nothing last night coming from Paul Townend, Willie Mullins or the stewards in terms of an explanation for what happened?
I would absolve Paul Townend of much of the blame in that regard. He will have gone in and partaken in a steward's inquiry and said his bit in there. Ideally, you would like to see him come out and hold his hands up and say, look, I've made a mistake, I apologise for it at the time. But given the place where his head will have been at the time, he'll have been in a fairly dark place. I would absolve him of that. I wouldn't absolve the IHRB. It's their responsibility to convey the message to punters and racegoers as to what exactly has happened at the track, and they failed miserably in that regard. And unfortunately, in terms of communications, it's not the first time that's happened. It's quite a regular occurrence. When there was the incident with Davy Russell himself last year at Tramore, same sort of thing. They let it fester, they let it fester, they let it fester. You have all sorts of conspiracy theories going on, and people start coming out with crazy stuff, you know, that Paul did this intentionally and all that. They should have dealt with it, and they could have lanced the ball last night and it would have been the end of it.
And we move from last night to what might happen tonight. There is a chance that sport being sport, Paul Tanner could go and win the big race today.
This is it. Things can change quickly in this game, and I hope for his sake it does. He has made a mistake, he's made a terrible mistake, but that doesn't change the fact that he's one of the best riders in the game. He's riding for Willie Mullins for a reason. The only reason he was in that position to make that mistake is because he's the rider he is. We're all human. The day that we eliminate human error is going to be a great day. I can't wait for it myself.